To the majority, my grandma embodied the sternest elderly Russian lady they'd ever encountered. Yet to me, she epitomized the finest guardian a youngster could ever wish for. My parents had me long before they were fully prepared emotionally or financially to raise a child, so my grandma stepped into the role and raised me primarily on her own. Even though grandma had experienced a privileged upbringing, her family lost everything during World War II. Like many European immigrants seeking a better future after the war, she immigrated to the United States in the late 1940s, accompanied by my 2-year-old mother. Despite having few connections, limited finances, and only a basic grasp of English, she managed to carve out a life for them. I wish I knew more about her backstory, but she always remained reticent to discuss it. My mother mentioned that grandma refrained from speaking Russian in public and kept her Soviet Union background private out of fear of potential repercussions from the KGB. Grandma had various peculiar habits, and although I don't claim to have expertise in mental health disorders, I sometimes wonder if she suffered from trauma-related obsessive-compulsive disorder. Every evening, before tucking me into bed, she would meticulously check that every door and window in our modest home was securely locked. The arrangement of every trinket on the fireplace mantel had to remain precisely as she left it. If I dared to move one of her Matryoshka dolls even slightly, she would notice and become greatly distressed. Additionally, she had a habit of tapping on surfaces, a nervous tic that also served as a self-soothing ritual. She always tapped 3 times, with a deliberate pause between the second and third tap. Once, I'd asked her about the significance of the pause, and she explained that 3 rapid taps were considered disrespectful, a mockery of the Holy Trinity. Though I found this notion absurd, it perfectly encapsulated the superstitious, traditional nature of my grandmother, endearing her to me even more. Around the age of 12, I began to mimic her taps throughout the house. It evolved from a nervous tic into a form of communication between us, a secret language shared between my favorite person and me. It wasn't until I reached my early teenage years that Grandma started to educate me about her heritage. She taught me simple Russian phrases, though she often lamented my poor pronunciation, introduced me to Orthodox prayers and customs, and my personal favorite, instructed me in the art of preparing some of her beloved dishes. Even now, I regularly cook she, much to my fiance's chagrin, as it fills our apartment with the scent of cabbage. But my absolute favorite was kulich, a delectable sweet bread we baked every Easter. Easter held a special significance for me, not just because of the culinary creations Grandma and I crafted together, but also due to a unique, let's say, ritual that I occasionally experienced on Holy Saturday night. When I was 14, Grandma invited me to join her at the worn dining table around midnight, where she lit several slender candles. She always seemed to have an abundance of them around the house, adorned with intricate engravings in the wax. Lighting 5 that night, she spoke to me with solemnity. "You can listen, Kolya, but you must not respond." Initially puzzled, I nodded, settling into silence across from her. As we watched the flickering flames, I began to discern whispers. Casting a questioning glance at Grandma, I realized her lips hadn't moved. I anticipate objections about the spiritual nature of such encounters. I won't attempt to persuade you, but I can attest that the experience felt anything but sinful. The atmosphere in that dim room was comforting, the voices gentle and oddly familiar. 5 voices in total, 2 feminine and 3 masculine, conversed in Russian and what I believe was French. Some flames extinguished quickly, others lingered. Though the candles were unscented, the room filled with a sweet aroma after their demise. Once the lights were back on, Grandma beamed at me, tears of joy in her eyes. "Who were they, Grandma?" I inquired as we tidied up. 5 loved ones no longer with us," she replied. "You did well, my dear. We can listen, but it's unwise to speak. We'll do it again next year. I'll teach you if you're interested." Later, she sent me to bed, my heart light with the promise of warm kulich come morning. My grandma passed away on January 3rd of this year, leaving me devastated. I feel guilty for my emotional turmoil, especially considering Grandma's resilience despite losing her entire family. trying to emulate her strength. I found myself feeling orphaned twice over, with little support from my biological parents. Though my fiancé and I have lived separately from my childhood home for years, Grandma left it to me, not my parents. Initially resistant to the idea of selling, the practicality of a larger home for our future family has become apparent. I visit occasionally to sort through her belongings and assess necessary repairs, but the absence of her presence makes lingering unbearable. A few days back, I had this notion to spend Holy Saturday alone in the house. Since my girlfriend isn't religious, she wouldn't mind being left alone, and I figured it might help me find the closure I've been seeking. Yesterday evening, I arrived at the house with a bag of essentials and another containing sentimental items. I spent hours wandering through the rooms, reminiscing over every crack in the wall and chip in the floorboards. Despite its emptiness, the house brimmed with memories, and I absorbed them eagerly, fearing they might fade away with time. Periodically, I'd tap my knuckles against the walls or floors. Around midnight, after setting up my sleeping area in my childhood bedroom, I headed to the dining room, one of the few rooms still furnished. I brought some Coolidge to snack on as I arranged items on the old wooden table, a nesting doll, a photo of my mom, grandma, and me, and the handwritten eulogy I delivered at Grandma's funeral, much of it in Russian. I also placed a long, thin candle I found among Grandma's belongings on the table. Lighting it, I sat down and waited. Nothing happened. No whispers, no flickering candle. An hour passed. With the candle nearly burnt out and my Coolidge finished, I refused to give up. Snuffing out the flame, I lit another candle. Again, I waited, straining my ears for any sign of Grandma. But there was only silence. When the second candle burned down, I lit the last one from my bag. One last attempt, I thought. One last attempt, and then sleep. Just past 3:30, as I retrieved my phone charger from my old bedroom, I heard a voice call out, "Kolya." "Yeah," I responded automatically, freezing in place. It was Grandma's voice, unmistakably. But something felt off. It was stood out, too different from the soft whispers of the past. And I had responded, breaking the rule of not engaging with the voices. Slowly, I returned to the dining room, ears pricked for any sound. There was no scent of honey, no warmth in my chest, only a heavy atmosphere. As I turned the corner, I couldn't believe what I saw. On the opposite end of the dining space stood my grandmother. Though the room was dimly lit by a lone candle, her face was discernible. Motionless, she held her gaze on me as I entered. I had solely encountered auditory manifestations on Holy Saturday. The sight of such a vivid apparition caught me off guard. "Greetings, my dear," she softly spoke, her tone more subdued, akin to the hushed murmurs of my upbringing. "I'm astonished," I replied. "I've returned for you," she whispered. Her countenance, her infrequent grin, the faint birthmark beneath her left eye, all were reminiscent of my memories. Despite the familiarity, a sense of unease lingered. Her posture seemed tense, an unusual stance for her. "Return from where, Grandma?" "From the realm," she matter-of-factly stated. I smiled. "Is it splendid?" She returned the smile. "Indeed it is." My attention shifted to the table. The candle's flame, now reduced to a mere few inches, remained upright. When I glanced back at Grandma, she had shifted slightly, appearing more stooped, with a predatory stance. "Grandma?" I questioned. She responded with a smile. I extended my hand towards the wooden surface. She paused. Briefly her smile faltered, revealing a different expression in the dim light, sharp, unfamiliar, and irate. Extending her arm, she tapped again. I leaned forward and extinguished the candle, enveloping the room in darkness. Stepping back from the table, it took a moment for my eyes to adjust. Yet, the dining room now appeared empty. I hesitated, uncertain if the connection had been severed, until the house itself responded. Windows rattled, the floor quaked, and the house reverberated with clamor. Furious banging echoed from all corners, as if a multitude lurked within the walls. Hastening to the front door, I was grateful for the small size of the house, allowing me to reach the handle in a few strides. Swinging open the door, I dashed towards the street, sparing a glance over my shoulder only upon crossing the threshold. In the hallway stood a figure, human-like but towering so much that even bent, its upper body graced the ceiling. Clad in a white garment reminiscent of a wedding dress, yet tarnished and marked with dark stains, it exuded an eerie presence. Thick white locks cascaded from its head, putting at its feet, which resembled filthy, clawed appendages. One arm leaned against the ceiling, while the other held a painted wooden disc adorned in the style of my grandmother's nesting dolls. However, the expression portrayed was far from the dolls' serene visages. Instead, it depicted sheer terror, with eyes wide in a silent scream and tears of blood streaming down its cheeks, framing a birthmark beneath the doll's eye. The creature's shoulders convulsed in what seemed like laughter as I fled. Upon reaching the deserted street, I glanced back at the house. No figure loomed in the hallway now, and the violent tremors that had threatened the house's stability diminished until all was calm once more. My former neighbor, roused by the commotion, lent me their phone to contact my fiancée. While I have no witness to what transpired within the house, the neighbor's experience of the tremors partially validates my account. Returning the next day in daylight, I gathered my belongings and the remnants of Grandma's possessions. Alongside seeking spiritual solace, I resolved to sell the house. Initially, I hesitated, feeling compelled to have an exorcist inspect the premises. However, the 3 distinct knocks I heard on my headboard last night dispelled any notion of finding peace through such means. For whatever lurks, it's not the house it seeks. It's me. It all began with our move to a new apartment, a space not entirely our own but one that seemed to promise newfound freedom and opportunity. The excitement of this fresh start was palpable, permeating every corner of our shared existence. Accompanied by my sister, whose identity I'll shield under the pseudonym Bella to safeguard her privacy, we embarked on this journey away from the familiar embrace of our parents' home. The allure of independence beckoned, casting a spell of exhilaration upon us as we dared to dream of the possibilities this new chapter held. However, the euphoria of our new beginning was soon overshadowed by an eerie incident that shook the very foundation of our reality. Returning home from work one evening, I found Bella ensconced in her room, her presence strikingly subdued. This sight puzzled me, as her work shift typically concluded after mine, and she hadn't mentioned anything about an early departure. As I ventured closer, a sense of foreboding crept over me, intensifying with each step. Bella sat motionless, her gaze fixed upon the wall with an unwavering intensity that sent shivers down my spine. It was as though time itself had come to a standstill in her presence. Calling out to her yielded no response. She remained ensnared in her trance, seemingly impervious to the outside world. With trepidation coursing through my veins, I reached out to shake her gently, hoping to snap her out of this unsettling reverie. But my efforts were met with silence, her demeanor akin to that of a statue carved from stone. A surge of panic washed over me as I grappled with the realization that something was profoundly amiss. Desperation clawed at my chest as I implored her to acknowledge me, to break free from whatever unseen grip held her in thrall. Yet, her only response was a haunting whisper, commanding me to leave her be. Stunned and bewildered, I retreated from her room, grappling with a myriad of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. That night, sleep evaded me as I wrestled with the implications of Bella's inexplicable behavior. Fear gnawed at my sanity, its icy tendrils coiling around my heart as I contemplated the darkness that seemed to have enveloped my sister's soul. In search of solace and understanding, I turned to the vast expanse of the internet, scouring countless articles and forums in a desperate bid for answers. The theories I encountered ranged from the mundane to the macabre, each one offering a different perspective on Bella's inexplicable transformation. Some suggested she might be grappling with unresolved trauma, while others posited the possibility of an underlying mental illness. And then there were those who dared to entertain the notion of something far more sinister at play, a malevolent force that sought to ensnare her in its sinister grasp. The mere mention of demonic possession sent a chill down my spine, casting a shadow of doubt over everything I thought I knew. Could it be possible that my beloved sister, my Bella, was under the influence of something beyond the realm of human comprehension? Though I recoiled at the thought, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the precipice of a darkness from which there might be no return. And as the nights grew longer and the shadows deeper, I couldn't help but wonder what dark secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic new life. The next morning dawned with Bella's absence from her workplace, a revelation that left me stunned. Confirming her abrupt departure with a phone call to her employer only deepened my sense of shock. As I clutched the receiver, a blood-curdling scream echoed from Bella's room, sending a wave of terror crashing over me. Racing to her side, I found her seated, fixated on the window with an intensity that chilled me to the core. Her screams pierced the air, a harrowing cacophony that seemed to emanate from the depths of her soul. Desperate to quell her distress, I approached, but my attempts at comfort fell on deaf ears. Instead, she redirected her gaze towards me, her eyes burning with an unfathomable intensity. Without warning, she began to strike herself with alarming force, each blow reverberating through the room like a thunderclap. I wept, pleading for her to cease this self-inflicted torment, but she seemed impervious to my pleas. The look she cast upon me sent shivers down my spine, a chilling reminder of the darkness that had enveloped her. Seeking guidance, I reached out to my mother, who urged me to return home immediately, to abandon the cursed confines of our rented abode. With a heavy heart, I gathered our belongings, my resolve unyielding despite Bella's reluctance to leave. With every ounce of strength I possessed, I dragged her from that accursed place, determined to break free from its malevolent grip. Back home, Bella remained inert, her silence a haunting reminder of the horrors that had befallen her. Despite our fervent entreaties, she remained unresponsive, lost in a world of her own making. Desperate for answers, I sought the aid of a psychiatrist, hoping to unlock the secrets of Bella's tortured mind. Yet, even the most potent treatments failed to elicit any improvement in her condition, leaving us trapped in a nightmarish cycle of despair. Turning to more unconventional methods, I sought the counsel of a shaman, only to be met with a reaction of abject terror upon his encounter with Bella. His swift departure served as a stark reminder of the sinister forces at play, forces beyond the realm of rational explanation. For 2 agonizing months, we have battled against the darkness that threatens to consume Bella's soul. Every avenue explored, every remedy exhausted, yet her condition remains unchanged. She sleeps fitfully, if at all, her silence a deafening testament to the anguish that plagues her tortured mind. As I gaze upon the long, jagged scratches that mar Bella's flesh, I am filled with a profound sense of dread. They are too deep, too vicious to have been inflicted by her own hand. Yet, she refuses treatment, her defiance a stark reminder of the insidious hold that grips her. As I pen these words, my heart weighs heavy with fear for my sister's well-being. I do not know what malevolent force has taken root within her, nor do I know how to rid her of its malignant influence. All I know is that I will stop at nothing to save her from the abyss that threatens to consume her, for to lose her would be a fate too cruel to bear. With each passing moment, I feel his looming presence drawing closer, his patience wearing thin. Unsure of how much longer I can endure his ceaseless vigil, I feel compelled to share my story now, lest his relentless pursuit reaches its climax. It began roughly a month ago with the departure of my neighbor across the street. Almost immediately, new occupants arrived, their moving trucks a stark reminder of the transient nature of our neighborhood. Though I never had the chance to exchange pleasantries with them, they seemed amiable enough, preferring to keep to themselves. However, it wasn't long before I noticed a peculiar pattern emerging. The front room light of their house remained ablaze throughout the night, casting an unwelcome glow that made restful sleep elusive. Curiosity eventually compelled me to investigate, prompting me to peek through my window in search of answers. What I encountered was unsettling. A figure cloaked in a crimson sweater, their gaze fixed upon me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Determined to confront this unsettling behavior, I resolved to visit their home the following morning. Yet, upon my awakening, I was greeted by a profound sense of unease, the lingering memory of the previous night's encounter weighing heavily upon me. Ignoring my discomfort, I made my way to their doorstep, only to be met with a jarring revelation. Before I could even utter a greeting, the door swung open with alarming speed, revealing the very individual whose gaze had haunted me in the darkness. Despite his outward friendliness, an unsettling aura enveloped him, casting doubt upon his true intentions. As I broached the subject of the incessant light emanating from their home, his demeanor shifted, his cryptic response sending a chill down my spine. Addressing me by name, despite my never having divulged such information, he uttered a perplexing phrase that left me reeling with confusion. Struggling to maintain composure, I pressed him for an explanation regarding his nocturnal activities, only to be met with a cryptic aphorism that offered little solace. Retreating to the safety of my own home, I found myself consumed by a sense of dread unlike anything I had ever experienced. Night after night, the glow of the front room light persisted, a constant reminder of the enigmatic presence dwelling across the street. His muttered words, though unintelligible, echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain that refused to be silenced. Unable to bear the weight of uncertainty any longer, I sought assistance from the local authorities, hoping they could shed light on this perplexing situation. Yet, their investigation yielded a disturbing revelation. No one resided in the house across the street, nor had it been sold following the departure of its previous occupants. As I grapple with the implications of their findings, I am left to wonder what malevolent force lurks within the shadows, tormenting me with its relentless pursuit. With each passing night, I fear that his presence grows stronger, his intentions more sinister. And so, I am left with no choice but to confront this malevolent specter head-on, praying that I may find solace in the light before it's too late. The disbelief and confusion only intensified as I vehemently disputed the authorities' assertion that the house across the street remained unoccupied. Despite my insistence on the possibility of squatters, they dismissed the notion, citing the supposed fate of our neighborhood as a deterrent to such occurrences. However, their assurances did little to quell the rising tide of fear that threatened to engulf me. The night following the police visit, the unsettling spectacle resumed, this time with the mysterious figure venturing into the street itself. Fueled by frustration and a growing sense of desperation, I resolved to confront this intruder head-on, armed with little more than a pocket pistol and a determination to reclaim my sense of security. Clad in my coat and shoes, I ventured outside, steeling myself for the confrontation that lay ahead. His eerie repetition of the cryptic phrase greeted me once more, sending a chill down my spine as I attempted to reason with him. But my words fell upon deaf ears, his relentless chant serving as a chilling reminder of the darkness that had descended upon our once peaceful neighborhood. Without warning, he lunged at me with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Instinctively, I discharged my weapon, the sound of gunfire ringing out in the night air. Yet, to my horror, the bullets seemed to have little effect, as he pressed on undeterred, his eyes ablaze with an otherworldly fervor. As I grappled with the realization that conventional means of defense were futile against this unearthly adversary, a sense of panic seized me. Retreating to the safety of my home, I barricaded the doors, praying that the flimsy barrier would be enough to keep him at bay. For what felt like an eternity, I remained holed up inside, my nerves frayed and my sense of time distorted by the relentless onslaught of fear and uncertainty. Outside, the relentless chanting continued, a constant reminder of the sinister presence that lurked just beyond my doorstep. Attempts to summon help proved futile as the authorities remained blind to the looming threat that encroached upon our once peaceful neighborhood. With each passing day, my supplies dwindled, leaving me with little more than a dwindling sense of hope and a growing sense of despair. As I write these words, I am gripped by a sense of helplessness unlike anything I have ever known. Trapped in a nightmare from which there seems to be no escape, I can only cling to the faint glimmer of hope that somehow, some way, I will find a way to break free from the clutches of this malevolent force that seeks to consume me. Amidst this sea of knowledge, his F&TO professional military education graduate ribbon stood proudly framed on the one wall not obscured by books. Seated at his table, cloaked in a red cloth that cascaded to the floor, my elder Andrew Lauren was engrossed in the timeless tale of Beowulf. His attire, a customary ensemble of faded beige suspenders, slacks, and a deep ruby shirt, seemed to blend seamlessly with the solemn atmosphere of his sanctum. With his imposing stature and weathered countenance, he exuded an air of authority tempered by wisdom. Puffing contentedly on his pipe, he gazed out of the wide window, lost in silent contemplation until my arrival interrupted his reverie. "Good morning, Jake," he greeted me warmly, setting aside his tobacco holder to address me directly. "We haven't had much time together since your arrival 2 days ago. I hope you understand that I'm not avoiding you." "I didn't think so," I replied. "I've always cherished the thought of having a grandson, and you were a true blessing when I learned of your existence. I understand that you're still grappling with recent events, and I wanted to give you the space you needed." "Thank you. I appreciate it. Since your grandma passed away, I've found myself withdrawing from the world a bit," he confessed, his gaze drifting momentarily. "It's a habit I know I shouldn't indulge, but one that seems to have taken hold of me nonetheless." His reference to the tragic plane crash that claimed the lives of my parents resonated deeply with me. The loss was a wound that had yet to fully heal, casting a shadow over my present and future alike. "My father followed in his footsteps and joined the military," I explained, reflecting on the circumstances that led me to my grandfather's doorstep. "As a result, they traveled extensively, bringing my mother along once I was old enough to be left behind. Though I had come to terms with their untimely deaths to some extent, the reality of their absence still lingered, casting a pall over my newfound existence." "I sense your restlessness," my grandfather observed, his tone tinged with empathy. "I know you yearn for the hustle and bustle of city life, to escape the solitude of these wide-open plains. It's only natural. You're free to roam the 2 acres of land I own, to explore and find solace in nature." "Thank you," I replied, grateful for the opportunity to stretch my legs beyond the confines of his home. "However," he continued, raising a cautionary finger, "I must impose some rules. Firstly, refrain from venturing into the meadow or adjacent fields to the southeast. Secondly, avoid any interaction with the neighboring Scroggins family. They're best left alone. And finally, never leave the property when accompanied, especially after dark." "Why not explore the outer reaches?" I inquired, puzzled by his stringent directives. "Please trust in my judgment," he urged, a note of urgency creeping into his voice. "Those lands are private property, and trespassing could have dire consequences. As for emergencies, we have a landline for that purpose. I refuse to entertain the distractions of modern technology." With a firm resolve, he dismissed any notion of deviation from his decrees, leaving me to ponder the mysteries that lay beyond the confines of our secluded abode. "As for entertainment," he added, "if boredom strikes, there's a chimney in need of cleaning in the foyer, a task that will keep you occupied and serve a useful purpose." With that, he returned to his reading, leaving me to contemplate the curious blend of tradition and seclusion that defined my new life under his watchful eye. Amy's eyes widened with curiosity as she surveyed the ancient artifacts within the dilapidated temple. The eerie glow emanating from the peculiar devices seemed to beckon her closer, but she hesitated, torn between fascination and trepidation. "We should go," I insisted, my voice trembling slightly with unease. "This place gives me the creeps." Amy tore her gaze away from the mysterious objects and nodded in agreement. Together, we made our way back outside, the sense of relief palpable as we left the eerie confines of the temple behind us. As we walked back towards my grandfather's estate, a sense of urgency gnawed at my gut. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes followed our every move from the shadows of the surrounding wilderness. The journey back felt longer than before, each step weighed down by the oppressive darkness that seemed to press in on us from all sides. The chirping of insects grew louder, their cacophony echoing through the night like a sinister chorus. Finally, the familiar silhouette of my grandfather's manor came into view, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. Relief washed over me as we reached the safety of the porch, the oppressive atmosphere of the wilderness fading away behind us. Once inside, I led Amy to the kitchen, where I poured us both glasses of iced tea and rummaged through the cupboards in search of popcorn. Despite the unsettling encounter at the temple, a sense of normalcy began to settle over us as we sat together at the kitchen table, enjoying our simple snacks in the warm glow of the overhead light. As the night wore on, the events of the evening gradually faded into the background, replaced by the comforting rhythm of conversation and companionship. Despite the strangeness of our encounter, I couldn't help but feel grateful for Amy's presence, her easygoing nature serving as a balm for my frayed nerves. Eventually, exhaustion began to catch up with us, and we both retired to our respective rooms for the night. As I lay in bed, the events of the evening replayed themselves in my mind, filling me with a sense of unease that refused to dissipate. But as sleep finally claimed me, I found solace in the knowledge that I wasn't alone, that Amy was just a room away, a reassuring presence in the darkness of the night. And for now, that was enough to ease my troubled mind. We continued on, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of grass beneath us. The meadow stretched out before us, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the dense canopy above. As we drew closer, the smell of smoke grew stronger, mingling with the earthy scent of the surrounding vegetation. Amy's grip tightened on my arm, her expression a mixture of fear and anticipation. I glanced back at her, my own heart pounding in my chest. Despite my growing unease, I couldn't shake the feeling of curiosity that tugged at me, urging me forward into the unknown. The meadow opened up before us, revealing a clearing in the center where a small fire burned. Shadows danced across the ground, casting eerie shapes on the grassy expanse. And there, in the flickering light of the flames, stood a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its form shrouded in darkness. Its eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intensity as it stared at us, its gaze piercing through the night like twin beacons of malice. Amy gasped beside me, her grip on my arm tightening even further. I could feel the fear radiating off her in waves, matching the rising terror that threatened to consume me whole. For a moment, neither of us moved, rooted to the spot by a paralyzing sense of dread. But then, with a sudden burst of courage, Amy stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "Who are you?" she called out, her words echoing through the silent meadow. The figure remained still, its eyes fixed on us with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "We mean no harm," Amy continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We're just passing through. Please, we just want to go home." But the figure said nothing, its silent vigil unbroken as it continued to watch us with unnerving intensity. And then, without warning, it began to move. With slow, deliberate steps, it advanced towards us, its movements fluid and sinuous like a predator stalking its prey. Panic surged through me, threatening to overwhelm my senses as I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. But Amy stood her ground, her gaze locked on the approaching figure with a mixture of fear and defiance. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving us alone in the silent meadow once more. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the echo of our own breathing the only sound in the still night air. And then, with a shaky sigh of relief, Amy turned to me, her eyes wide with fear but also determination. "We need to go," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Now." I nodded, my own heart still racing as we turned and hurried back the way we had come, the memory of the encounter burning in my mind like a brand. As we reached the edge of the meadow and the safety of the tree line, I glanced back over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing there, only the empty expanse of the meadow stretching out into the darkness beyond. With one last glance, I turned away, my heart heavy with the weight of what we had encountered in the silent meadow. And as we made our way back to the safety of my grandfather's estate, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, something that had been lurking in the shadows of the wilderness long before we ever set foot in its domain. As the night deepened and the stars glittered in the sky like scattered diamonds, casting their faint light upon the world below, the sense of foreboding that had settled over us refused to dissipate. Despite the warmth of my grandfather's home and the comforting presence of Amy by my side, a shroud of unease lingered in the air, like a dark cloud threatening to unleash its fury upon us at any moment. I couldn't shake the memory of the creature we had encountered in the meadow. Its unearthly appearance burned into my mind like a brand. The way it moved, the eerie glow that emanated from its body, the chilling sound of its discordant music as it beckoned us closer, all of it sent shivers down my spine and filled me with a sense of dread unlike anything I had ever experienced before. And yet, despite the terror that gripped me, there was also a gnawing curiosity, a desire to unravel the mysteries of that cursed land and uncover the truth behind the dark forces that lurked within its depths. I knew it was foolish and reckless to entertain such thoughts, but I couldn't help but feel drawn to the unknown, like a moth to a flame. As I sat with Amy and my grandfather in the cozy confines of the kitchen, sipping our iced tea and exchanging stories and laughter in an attempt to push aside the lingering fear that threatened to consume us, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be unearthed. My grandfather, ever the stoic and pragmatic man, tried to reassure us with tales of old folklore and superstition, attributing our encounter with the creature to nothing more than the overactive imagination of a troubled mind. But deep down I knew there was more to it than that. There was a darkness in those meadows, a malevolence that defied rational explanation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface of something far more sinister. As the night wore on and the hour grew late, my grandfather bid us good night and retired to his study, leaving Amy and me alone in the dimly lit kitchen. Despite the comforting presence of her company, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at my insides, like a hungry beast seeking to devour me whole. "We should get some rest," Amy said, breaking the silence that had settled between us like a heavy fog. I nodded in agreement, grateful for the distraction her voice provided. Rising from my chair, I followed her lead as she led the way up the creaky staircase to the second floor, where our respective rooms awaited us. As I settled into bed, the events of the day replayed themselves in my mind like a haunting melody, each note filled with a sense of dread and uncertainty. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me, and I tossed and turned restlessly, tormented by visions of that cursed land and the sinister creature that dwelled within it. In the darkness of my room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation, as though I were adrift in a sea of darkness with no hope of rescue. And as the night stretched on and the world outside fell silent, I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking just beyond the edges of my consciousness, waiting to strike when I least expected it. But try as I might to push aside my fears and drift off into a peaceful slumber, I couldn't escape the feeling of impending doom that hung over me like a shadow, casting its dark pall over everything I held dear. And as I lay there in the darkness, listening to the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat echoing in the silence, I couldn't help but wonder what horrors awaited us in the days to come, and whether we would have the strength to face them head-on and emerge unscathed from the darkness that threatened to consume us all. As my grandfather's words echoed in the dimly lit room, a heavy silence settled over us like a suffocating blanket. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the weight of his sacrifice bore down on my shoulders like a burden too heavy to bear. I struggled to comprehend the enormity of what he was proposing, the sheer selflessness of his act leaving me reeling with disbelief. How could he willingly offer himself up to such a malevolent force, sacrificing his own life to protect us from its insidious grasp? Amy's father nodded sullenly, his expression grave as he contemplated the gravity of the situation. There was a haunted look in his eyes, a silent acknowledgment of the horrors that lurked in the darkness beyond our safe haven. "We have no choice," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "It is the only way to prevent further harm from coming to our community. We must appease the creature, lest it unleash its wrath upon us all." I wanted to protest, to argue that there had to be another way, but the words caught in my throat as I struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what we were facing. My mind raced with 1,000 questions, each one more terrifying than the last. But before I could gather my thoughts and voice my objections, my grandfather rose from his seat with a determined look in his eyes. He had made his decision, and nothing I could say or do would sway him from his chosen path. With a heavy heart, I watched as he retrieved a shovel from the corner of the room and made his way out into the night, disappearing into the darkness without a backward glance. A sense of profound loss washed over me, a gnawing emptiness that threatened to consume me whole. For a moment, I stood frozen in place, unable to comprehend the enormity of what had just transpired. My mind struggled to process the reality of the situation, the weight of my grandfather's sacrifice weighing heavily on my conscience. But as the reality of the situation sunk in, a newfound resolve began to take hold within me. I couldn't allow my grandfather's sacrifice to be in vain. I had to honor his memory, to carry on his legacy, and ensure that his sacrifice was not made in vain. With a renewed sense of purpose, I turned to Emmy and her father, determination burning bright in my eyes. "We have to find a way to stop this thing," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "We can't let it continue to terrorize our community. We have to put an end to it, once and for all." Together, we made a silent vow to stand united against the darkness that threatened to consume us, to fight for our survival and the safety of those we held dear. And as we braced ourselves for the battle that lay ahead, I knew that no matter what trials and tribulations awaited us, we would face them together, as a united front against the forces of evil that sought to destroy us. "He's advancing towards you." That's the message the previously possessed man conveyed. Though meant universally, his accusatory finger singled out just one: myself. Adding weight to his tale of torment was the pentagram etched onto his throat and the digits of the beast adorning his knuckles. Pastor Cam introduced him as Pat, a former adherent of darkness. Pat's appearance, however, belied his supposed renunciation of evil. Embracing Christianity seemed to come with a sartorial transformation and a facial makeover, did it not? He paced the tangerine rug in the dank undercroft of the church, leaving murky imprints from the soil on his motorbike boots. I witnessed my mother's attempt to end her life with our antiquated furnace. He refrained from elaborating. My limited understanding of furnaces conjured images of a person thrusting themselves into a fiery abyss. A spectral figure materialized on the cellar steps as I indulged in heavy music and substances. His vague allusions to the music and his altered state detracted from his credibility. He sounded akin to a public service announcement interlude on a Saturday morning. I couldn't bear to touch or gaze upon a Bible. Stepping foot inside a church felt akin to being scorched. Since we were presently within one, I presumed his discomfort had abated. Tossing a Bible at him with a jocular catch would likely be frowned upon. Chelsea wouldn't approve. Her suggestion to rejoin the youth group on free days had served as both a prerequisite and a stipulation of our burgeoning relationship, which commenced a week prior at school. We'd exchanged kisses at the dance, and I nearly grazed her brassiere. It hadn't progressed beyond that. She harbored concerns for our eternal souls. I remained uncertain if we possessed any, yet refrained from applying pressure, lest I be deemed the local lecturer. Christians possess a peculiar irony. By affording themselves the opportunity for penance and redemption, they engage in behaviors they deem taboo. It wasn't the non-believing girls engaging in premarital liaisons and childbirth, a paradox that suited a cunning teenager like myself. Thus, I consented to attend, entertaining the notion that Pat might offer an intriguing discourse when the youth pastor announced the evening's guest speaker. He appeared bewildered and afflicted. I pitied him momentarily, then grew impatient. Our intended destination was the fast food establishment whose name I deem unnecessary to divulge, for its ubiquity renders it self-evident. You understand my reticence. I seek no legal entanglements. Satan is tangible, Pat asserted, culminating in his final proclamation. He's real. He manifests in myriad guises. Your patriarch, your matriarch, your siblings, even Yogi Bear, Super Mario. You'll discern the devil when he sets his sights on you. It was then that his accusatory gaze fixated upon me, his breath labored, almost wheezing. A disconcerting warmth suffused my cheeks under the unexpected scrutiny. I offered a strained smile, seeking solace in the crowd, yet found only furrowed brows. "Thank you, Pat," Pastor Cam interjected, applauding half-heartedly before ceasing in the face of the palpable tension. Pat retreated to the rear seats. The pastor initiated a closing prayer to conclude the proceedings. I stole a glance at Pat, discovering him staring intently in my direction. Beads of sweat dotted his brow, his tremors betraying a concealed sense of satisfaction, barely concealed by a fleeting smirk. I averted my gaze hastily. "Amen," the pastor concluded. "Good night, everyone. Stay safe." We lingered momentarily, confirming arrangements to reconvene at the aforementioned burger joint. I kept a vigilant watch for Pat, for his fixation upon me was unmistakable. My facial expressions often betray my skepticism. Undoubtedly, he discerned my incredulity towards his fragmented tale. Perched in the rear seats, he remained fixated on me. I shrugged at him in a gesture that conveyed, "What on earth?" Chelsea's tug on my arm diverted my attention. "Let's leave," she urged. I acquiesced with a nod. In that brief interlude, Pat vanished. What a farce! His attempt at intimidation fell flat. Unfortunately, I couldn't entirely dispel my own unease. The night descended into a chill. Paul, the eccentric lad, as jittery as the ex-possessed, attempted a feeble joke about smoking, mimicking the action with his fingers and wheezing theatrically. It elicited no laughter. The sound of boots crunching on a thin blanket of snow accompanied our somber procession towards the burger place. The biting cold precluded any semblance of decorum. As the seven of us traversed from the church to the sidewalk-less perimeter, the streetlight overhead flickered out. We didn't comment until we had strayed from its expected radiance. It flickered back to life. "Spooky," Paul remarked, his laughter ringing out as though he'd cracked another joke. The unease set in when the subsequent streetlight suffered a similar fate. We halted, uncertain how to interpret the mildly intriguing phenomenon. Chelsea grasped my hand tightly. "Let's keep moving. It's freezing," she stated, though her grip suggested a deeper fear. I didn't mind the consummate contact as long as she sought solace in it. Once again, the light resumed its illumination as we ventured beyond its reach. The following block comprised mostly mud and abandoned construction sites from a failed development project. Streetlights here were scarce, limited to just two, yet their sporadic malfunctions unnerved us. "This is too bizarre," Paul remarked, his earlier joviality replaced by a pensive expression. "Can we try something? Leave one by one?" "No, absolutely not," I interjected, hastening our progress and unwittingly complying. I found myself isolated beneath the glowing orb. Chelsea had released my hand, and amidst the distraction of the enigmatic lights, I failed to notice. The encompassing halo of electric illumination graced the remaining 6 figures. "It's you," Paul accused, his tone laced with vindication. As an outsider to the youth group, I bore the brunt of their distrust. Chelsea had ceased attending the church prior to our acquaintance, a fact that didn't sit well with the boys upon her return with a new companion. "Of course," I replied, discomfited but attempting to conceal it. "Let's keep moving." The group resumed its journey. Chelsea's touch on my arm halted my stride. "Return to the light." "What?" "Go back. I want to see." "Really? Can't we?" I insist. "Fine." I retraced my steps to the light, feigning distress, clutching at my throat. "It burns. It burns. Oh, the agony." The others chuckled, but Chelsea remained solemn. The streetlight remained unaltered, steadfast in its illumination. When the subsequent light faltered, no one commented as we pressed forward. Along Rock Church Road, streetlights were a rarity until the burger place, and those already flickered erratically. Many eateries had undergone renovations to emulate coffee shops, but not this one. This establishment appeared forgotten amidst a developer's purgatory. Surrounding it were expanses of mud, designated for homes that never materialized, relics of economic downturns. We had chosen the burger place due to its proximity and convenience. Yet, upon arrival, I found myself disinclined to enter. "Do you want to head home instead?" I proposed to Chelsea. She frowned. Fellowship with fellow Christians is crucial. Reluctantly, I acquiesced, attempting to pass off the suggestion as jest. However, she appeared unconvinced. Inside, Pastor Cam surprised us with soft-serve cones, a generous gesture on his youth pastor's salary. 21 cones for $21. Most of the youth group had driven there. I appreciated the complimentary ice cream, as my wallet only held $5, barely enough for a happy meal. Fortunately, the cones sufficed for Chelsea. The air within felt dense and greasy. Inhaling it seemed calorically unwise. Several track lights flickered, casting a dreary atmosphere accentuated by harsh pools of blue light. Those in shadow appeared sickly, while those under the harsh illumination seemed manic. Sitting on the hard plastic benches and chairs proved uncomfortable for all of us. I harbored a general disdain for the burger place. This particular branch, in case my disdain wasn't evident, I abhorred. I endeavored not to betray my desire to depart. We occupied a table at the far end, observing the antics of the boisterous teens. They cracked jokes and shot spitballs while a weary-looking employee implored the pastor for better conduct. I silently concurred with the employee. The group comprised awkward misfits bound by vague religious notions. Outside the confines of the church, they were silent outcasts. I preferred them that way. Even Chelsea seemed embarrassed. "It could be worse," I murmured. "There could be other patrons here." Besides the sparse employees, I'd only spotted two. Our youth group comprised the sole customers. I jumped when that changed. A loud thud against the window drew our attention to two oversized white gloves. "That clown, the one you're picturing, with trademark red hair and a wide grinning mouth." He was synonymous with the burger place in ideology, but his presence at a random franchise in the dead of night was inexplicable. The parking lot housed only Pastor Cam's car. The clown had arrived on foot. The entire group, including the employee, watched as he pressed his nose against the glass, causing it to frost and distort his colorful features into something sinister. Before I could urge the employee to lock the door, the clown flung it open, creating a vacuum that sucked the air from the dining area. With oversized shoes, he stomped towards us, sweat streaming from his skin. Heat radiated from him, and his expression, fixed in a permanent grimace, bespoke anger. I braced for an assault, certain it was imminent. But then he saw me. The simmering rage dissipated, replaced by a lazy smile. He extended his gloved hand in greeting, the other hand rummaging in his yellow coveralls, producing a deflated balloon, a token of his expected camaraderie. I shook my head. "No, thank you." He took the rejection in stride, turning to the others who found an unexpected clown in the night more intriguing than frightening. Paul eagerly shook his hand, casting a victorious glance in my direction. The clown reciprocated, and even Pastor Cam found amusement in the situation, accepting the balloons with a chuckle. Chelsea reluctantly accepted his hand, placing the limp balloon on the table beside her napkin. I noticed the employee on his phone, likely reporting the incident to a manager. Nobody anticipated or desired a clown in the dead of night. When he offered his hand to me again, his mouth slightly agape as if out of breath, I couldn't help but find it odd. Yet, no one else seemed perturbed, a testament to the company's quality. "Go on, shake his hand," Paul urged. "Come on." The clown waited patiently. "I'm not shaking your hand." "Now, piss off," I retorted firmly. My words met with vocal disapproval from the group. Pastor Cam began to admonish me, but his words were lost amidst the noise. Pushing past the clown, I addressed Chelsea. "I'm leaving. Are you coming?" She hesitated, and unfairly, I left her behind. Regret gnawed at me before I even reached the end of the parking lot. Turning back, I saw her leaving that burger place with another group of kids. Perhaps she noticed me. but she made no acknowledgement. Stubbornly, I couldn't bring myself to apologize in front of others. Alone, I embarked on the long walk home, 40 minutes along Rock Church Road to my neighborhood, though longer to my house due to the forest remnants blocking the direct path. Walking through the woods at night held no appeal. My plan was to circumvent the forest via Gorth Street, the area purportedly crime-proof due to its close design. Despite this, many houses still fell victim to burglary. The thieves simply approached on foot. The gaps between streetlights felt vast. Stepping into each pool of light, I half expected it to extinguish. When it remained illuminated, relief washed over me, allowing me to focus on the real dilemma: how to apologize to Chelsea and win her back. Passing rows of unfinished houses, the landscape transitioned into overgrown fields, once farmland bought up by developers but left dormant. The only notable structure ahead was the dilapidated rock church, no longer holding services, its stone walls crumbling into ruins. The freezing wind pierced through me, my ears and fingertips burning. As someone who prided himself on being cool, I rarely wore a hat or gloves. Seeking refuge from the biting cold, I nestled into a corner of the abandoned church's remaining walls, breathing warmth into my cupped hands. It was then that I noticed the first streetlight, where the houses ended and the road cut through the fields, flicker out. Squinting through the flurry of snow, my vision obscured by watery eyes, I watched in uncertainty. The streetlight blinked back to life, only to extinguish again moments later, followed by the next. Feeling trapped in the corner of the desolate church, I cursed the frozen ground as I stumbled onto the sidewalk. Like a character in a horror movie, I attempted to glance back while walking, only to trip over the uneven slabs of concrete. As I fell, the nearest streetlight shut off. Panic surged through me as I scrambled backward, failing to rise as a looming shadow approached. Closing my eyes, I whimpered, "Leave me alone." When the suffocating stench lifted, I forced myself to look. The clown remained, his glove extended for a handshake. Sweat had smudged his makeup, and the red around his mouth resembled dripping blood. The surrounding light dimmed, flickering in time with the clown's blinking eyes. It was as if he willed the streetlight to obey him, an unsettling realization. Offering a handshake, he crouched lower, pushing the glove under my nose. Within, writhing strands of ground beef wriggled like worms, emanating a nauseating odor. "No," I whispered, resisting the temptation despite the sinister allure. The command echoed in the air, devoid of human intonation, its raspy undertone hanging in the snow-filled silence. "Shake my hand. Shake it now." "I won't." "Leave me alone," I replied firmly, but the clown seemed momentarily frozen. Then, its mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, revealing a purplish tongue slithering over decaying teeth. Yellowish tears streaked down its white-painted cheeks as it wept, casting its gaze to the fading streetlight above. "You must," it insisted, its voice devoid of breath or lungs. Meeting its gaze, I glimpsed the color of its eyes once more. I understood then that resistance came with a price: death. As the light flickered out, the clown's disguise faltered, forcing it to retreat into the darkness, its natural domain. With the terrifying visage gone, my survival instincts kicked in, propelling me into a frantic sprint down Rockchurch Road. The trees loomed ominously, but the thought of facing the clown spurred me onward. The darkness of the woods seemed preferable to encountering that horror again. Another extinguished light behind me erased any hesitation, and I plunged into the forest. Branches clawed at me as I ran, the stench of the clown fueling my panic. I screamed and thrashed, refusing to yield to its call. Emerging from the woods onto Rockchurch Road once more, I glimpsed the clown briefly illuminated by a nearby streetlight. Determined to reach safety, I fixated on a distant porch light and raced towards it. The clown's footsteps echoed behind me, but I refused to falter. Suddenly, I stumbled, whether from the uneven ground or divine intervention, I couldn't say. Gasping for breath, I turned to confront my pursuer. The clown lay impaled on a tree stump, writhing in confusion and pain. Despite my fear and revulsion, a pang of pity stirred within me. As the clown's life ebbed away, I knelt beside it, a gesture both foolish and sincere. With its final breaths, I took its limp hand in mine, yielding to its demand. And as the cologne breathed its last, a strange calm settled over me. No police arrived, no news stories circulated, only the weight of my newfound burden, for I had shaken its hand. And now I could never touch the Bible again.